Dear viewers, prepare yourselves for an extraordinary tale that will touch your hearts and remind you of the mysterious ways life connects us all. In the snow-covered mountains of Montana, a chance encounter between a man and a frozen bear unveils an incredible story of survival, gratitude, and destiny. And this remarkable journey spans decades, revealing how a childhood miracle returns full circle in the most astonishing way. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. Every story brings our community closer together. The bitter winter of 1985 carved its way through the Montana wilderness, leaving the Gallatin National Forest buried under feet of pristine snow. 10-year-old Michael Thompson shivered as he pulled his red wool coat tighter around his small frame. He hadn't meant to wander this far from the family cabin, but the afternoon's adventure had taken an unexpected turn when the snow began falling harder, obscuring his tracks. "Dad!" Michael called out, his voice swallowed by the howling wind. "Dad, where are you?" The setting sun painted the snow-laden branches in haunting shades of orange and purple, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Fear began to creep into his chest as he realized he had no idea which direction would lead him home. The boy's boots crunched through the deepening snow as he trudged forward, each step becoming more difficult than the last. His thoughts drifted to the warm fireplace at the cabin, where his father would be preparing their traditional winter stew. They had come to Montana every winter since Michael's mother passed away 3 years ago, finding solace in the quiet wilderness that seemed to understand their grief. As darkness descended, Michael's situation became increasingly dire. His fingers had gone numb despite his thick mittens, and his teeth chattered uncontrollably. Exhausted, he stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed against a fallen log. Tears froze on his cheeks as he imagined his father's panic, searching frantically through the forest for his only son. The sound came without warning, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. Michael's heart nearly stopped as he slowly turned his head toward the source. There, not 20 feet away, stood an enormous grizzly bear, its breath visible in the frigid air. But something was different about this bear. Instead of the aggressive stance Michael had been warned about, this creature's eyes held an almost human-like awareness. The bear approached cautiously, its massive form moving with surprising grace through the snow. Michael remained frozen in place, too terrified to run, too exhausted to fight. But what happened next would alter the course of his life forever. The bear stopped mere feet from him, its dark eyes studying him intently. Then, in a movement that defied everything Michael knew about wild animals, it slowly lowered itself to the ground beside him. The bear's massive body created a windbreak against the brutal storm, and its fur radiated a life-saving warmth. "Please," Michael whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "Please, don't hurt me." The bear's only response was to shift slightly closer, creating a protective semicircle around the boy's shivering form. As the night grew colder and darker, the bear remained, its steady breathing a surreal lullaby in the wilderness. Hours passed, and Michael drifted in and out of consciousness, kept alive by the bear's incredible body heat. He thought he must be dreaming when he heard distant voices calling his name. Saw flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The bear lifted its head, alert but unafraid. "Here! He's over here!" A familiar voice, his father's, broke through the night. As the search party approached, Michael expected the bear to flee or attack. Instead, it rose slowly, gave him one last penetrating look, and lumbered away into the darkness, leaving no trace of its miraculous intervention. The rescue team found Michael curled up in the snow, cold but alive. His father swept him into his arms, sobbing with relief. "A bear," Michael tried to explain through chattering teeth. "A bear saved me." The adults exchanged concerned glances, assuming he was delirious from the cold. But Michael knew what had happened. He knew he had experienced something extraordinary, something he would never forget. That night changed something in Michael Thompson. As he grew older, the memory of the bear's inexplicable kindness shaped his understanding of the world. teaching him that sometimes the most profound acts of compassion come from the most unexpected sources. What he couldn't know then was that 40 years later, fate would bring him face to face with his savior once again, in circumstances that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the natural world, gratitude, and the mysterious bonds that connect all living beings. In the gathering darkness of the search party's departure, the bear watched from the shadows, an intelligence burning in its eyes that went far beyond mere animal instinct. The night's events had forged a connection that would span decades, waiting for the moment when the circle would finally close and past would meet present in an encounter that would shake the foundations of both man and beast. 40 years had carved deep lines into Michael Thompson's face, each wrinkle a testament to a life lived in pursuit of understanding the natural world. Now a respected wildlife veterinarian in Bozeman, Montana, he had dedicated his career to protecting the very creatures that had once saved his life. The memory of that night in 1985 remained as crisp as the mountain air, a constant reminder of nature's capacity for unexpected mercy. The emergency call came on a brutally cold January morning in 2025. A local ranger had reported a disturbing sight, a massive grizzly bear, apparently trapped in a frozen pond near the outskirts of Gallatin National Forest. What made the situation particularly unusual was the bear's behavior. It seemed to be consciously keeping its head above water as if waiting for help. "Dr. Thompson, we need you out here." Ranger's Chief Sarah Martinez's voice crackled through his phone. "This isn't like anything we've seen before. The bear, it's acting strange, almost human." Those last words sent a shiver down Michael's spine that had nothing to do with the winter chill. He grabbed his emergency kit and headed out, his truck cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. As he drove, memories of that long-ago night flooded back. The bear's intelligent eyes, its deliberate gentleness, the inexplicable decision to save a lost child. The scene that greeted him at the pond was surreal. Emergency floodlights cast an ethereal glow across the ice, illuminating a dark shape partially submerged in the frozen water. The bear's massive head rested on the ice's edge, its breath coming in labored puffs of steam, but it was the creature's eyes that stopped Michael in his tracks, deep, knowing eyes that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. "My God," he whispered, approaching the edge of the pond. The bear's gaze locked onto him, and in that moment, something profound and impossible clicked into place. Those eyes, he knew those eyes. "Be careful, Dr. Thompson," Chief Martinez warned, but Michael barely heard her. He was already moving closer, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that defied rational explanation. The bear made no aggressive moves as Michael approached. Instead, it let out a low, mournful sound that seemed to carry decades of waiting within it. As Michael knelt at the pond's edge, close enough to see his reflection in the bear's eyes, the animal did something extraordinary. It lifted its massive paw and deliberately placed it on the ice in front of him. Michael's breath caught in his throat. There, clearly visible on the bear's paw, was a distinctive scar, a jagged line that ran from pad to claw. His hands began to tremble as he remembered something from that night, 40 years ago, a detail he had forgotten until this very moment. The bear that saved him had the same scar. "It's you," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "After all these years, it's really you." The bear's eyes seemed to soften with recognition, and in that moment Michael knew with absolute certainty that this was no coincidence. This was the same creature that had sheltered him through that terrible night, now trapped and in desperate need of the same mercy it had once shown him. "We need to get him out now," Michael announced, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "This isn't just any bear, this is—" He paused, knowing how impossible it would sound. "This is the bear that saved my life when I was a boy." The rescue team exchanged skeptical glances, but something in Michael's demeanor made them hold their doubts. As they began preparing their equipment, Michael never took his eyes off the bear. He could see the creature's strength failing. its massive body trembling with cold and exhaustion. "Hold on," he whispered, reaching out toward the bear in a gesture that made the rangers nervously reach for their tranquilizer guns. "I won't let you die, not after what you did for me. This time, I'm the one who's going to save you." As the rescue operation began in earnest, none of the onlookers could explain the extraordinary connection they witnessed between the veterinarian and the trapped bear. But as dawn began to paint the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, they would all become witnesses to a miracle that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between humans and animals, about memory, and about the debts we owe to those who save us. The rescue operation unfolded like a desperate dance between life and death. Steam rose from the freezing pond as rescue workers carefully maneuvered their equipment around the trapped bear. Michael Thompson stood at the center of it all, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. Every labored breath from the massive creature sent ripples of memory through him, echoes of that long-ago night when their roles had been reversed. "Easy now," Michael called out, his eyes never leaving the bear's increasingly exhausted gaze. "The ice is too thin for mechanical equipment. We'll have to do this by hand." He stripped off his heavy coat, ignoring the bitter Montana wind that cut through his thermal layers. The bear watched his every move with an intelligence that made several rescue workers step back in amazement. Chief Martinez grabbed his arm. "Dr. Thompson, you can't be serious about going out there yourself. That ice won't hold you." Michael gently removed her hand, his expression resolute. "It held me 40 years ago when I was lost in these woods. When everyone else had given up hope, this bear kept me alive. I owe him everything I've become." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes duty goes beyond professional obligations, Sarah. Sometimes it's about paying back a debt that can never truly be repaid." The bear let out a low, mournful sound that seemed to carry all the weight of their shared history. Its massive paw, bearing that distinctive scar, scratched weakly at the ice. The movement sent spiderweb cracks racing across the frozen surface. "Time's running out," Michael announced, securing a safety line around his waist. He turned to the rescue team, his eyes bright with determination. "Whatever happens, no tranquilizers. In this cold, with his body temperature already dangerously low, it would kill him instantly." As Michael carefully made his way onto the ice, memories flooded his consciousness. He remembered the warmth of the bear's fur against his frozen body, the steady rhythm of its breathing that had kept him anchored to life throughout that terrible night. Now, 4 decades later, he could finally return that life-saving embrace. The ice groaned ominously beneath his feet as he inched closer to the trapped animal. 20 feet away, then 15, then 10. The bear's eyes never left his face, and in them, Michael saw something that defied explanation, recognition, trust, and an almost human pleading. "I'm here," Michael soothed, his voice carrying across the pristine morning air. "I'm here, old friend, just like you were there for me." The words seemed to calm the massive creature, its struggles lessening as Michael approached. Suddenly, with a sound like artillery fire, the ice began to crack. Michael lunged forward just as the surface gave way beneath him, plunging into the freezing water alongside the bear. The shock of the cold drove the air from his lungs, but his hand found purchase on the bear's thick fur. "Pull them both out!" Chief Martinez screamed, but the rescue team hesitated, torn between saving their colleague and facing down a potentially aggressive bear. In that moment of crisis, something extraordinary happened. The bear, summoning strength from some deep reservoir of will, wrapped one massive paw around Michael's torso, not to attack but to protect, just as it had done 4 decades earlier. Together, man and beast fought against the freezing water, their struggle illuminated by the rescue lights and the first rays of dawn. The rescue team watched in awe as Michael and the bear moved as one, working in perfect synchronization. When they finally managed to pull them both from the water, the bear didn't release its gentle hold on Michael until they were safely on solid ground, far from the treacherous ice. Wrapped in emergency blankets, Michael sat beside the massive creature as paramedics checked his vital signs. The bear, exhausted but alive, remained unnaturally calm, its eyes fixed on the man who had risked everything to save it. "You know," Michael said softly, his hand resting on the bear's wet fur, "I never got to thank you properly for that night. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to what you taught me about compassion." The bear's response was a gentle huff of warm breath that misted in the cold air between them. But as the adrenaline of the rescue faded, Michael began to notice something troubling. The bear's breathing was becoming increasingly labored, and its massive body trembled with more than just cold. Something was wrong, desperately, dangerously wrong. The emergency veterinary clinic in Bozeman had never seen anything quite like it. The massive grizzly bear lay on a reinforced examination table, its breath coming in ragged gasps that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Michael Thompson stood beside the creature, his clothes still damp from the frozen pond, his hand resting gently on the bear's massive head. "His heart is failing," Dr. Rebecca Chen announced, studying the portable ultrasound with growing concern. "The stress of the cold, his age, it's all taking its toll." She glanced at Michael, her eyes filled with professional sympathy. "Even if we could perform surgery, the chances of survival at his age—" "No," Michael interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of unspoken gratitude. "I won't give up on him. Not now, not ever." The bear's eyes found his, and in them, Michael saw the same unwavering determination that had kept him alive during that bitter winter night so long ago. Against all protocol and safety regulations, Michael had insisted on staying with the bear during the examination. The massive creature remained eerily calm in his presence, responding to his voice with an almost human understanding. The staff watched in amazement as Michael leaned close to the bear's ear, whispering words that seemed to transcend the boundaries between species. "Remember that night?" Michael murmured, his fingers gently stroking the coarse fur. "You didn't give up on a scared little boy lost in the wilderness. You chose to protect instead of harm, to save instead of abandon." The bear's breathing seemed to steady slightly at the sound of his voice. "Now it's my turn to fight for you, Doctor." Chen approached cautiously with a syringe of medication. This might help stabilize his heart rhythm, but Michael— She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What you're describing, a bear remembering a specific human after 40 years, showing this level of recognition and trust, it defies everything we know about wildlife behavior." The bear suddenly lifted its massive head, turning to look directly at Dr. Chen. The intelligence in its gaze made her step back involuntarily. Michael smiled, a sad, knowing expression crossing his weathered face. "Sometimes the greatest mysteries in nature aren't the ones we can explain," he said softly, "but the ones we can only witness and believe." He reached down, gently touching the scar on the bear's paw. "This isn't just any bear. This is my guardian, my protector, and now he needs us to be his." As the medication took effect, the bear's breathing began to even out, but Michael could sense something deeper was wrong. The creature's eyes held a wisdom and weariness that spoke of battles fought beyond human understanding. In that moment, Michael made a decision that would challenge everything he knew about wildlife medicine and the bonds between species. "There's an experimental treatment," he said suddenly, turning to Dr. Chen. "The stem cell therapy we've been developing for cardiac rehabilitation in large mammals. It's never been tried on a wild bear, but it's completely untested in this context," Dr. Chen protested. "The risks are nothing compared to the debt I owe him," Michael finished firmly. The bear rumbled softly, as if understanding the weight of the moment. He risked everything to save a stranger that night. "How can I do any less for him now?" As the medical team began preparing for the unprecedented procedure, Michael noticed something extraordinary. The bear's paw, the one bearing the distinctive scar, moved deliberately across the examination table. With careful precision, it traced patterns in the condensation that had formed on the steel surface, patterns that looked eerily like letters. Michael's heart nearly stopped as he watched, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Could it be possible? Was there more to this creature's intelligence than even he had imagined? The answer would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about the natural world and the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. The veterinary clinic fell into a hushed silence as Michael Thompson knelt beside the examination table, his eyes fixed on the impossible sight before him. The bear's massive paw moved with deliberate purpose across the steel surface, tracing letters that sent shivers down his spine. In the condensation, clear as daylight, appeared 3 words: "Remember the cabin." Michael's legs nearly gave out beneath him. The cabin, his father's old hunting lodge where everything had begun 40 years ago. But how could this be possible? His mind raced back to that fateful night, searching for details he might have missed, clues that could explain this extraordinary development. "Dr. Chen," he called out, his voice trembling, "I need you to see this." As the veterinarian approached, the bear's eyes tracked her movement with an intelligence that defied explanation. Its breathing had steadied somewhat, but the gravity in its gaze spoke of urgency, of precious time slipping away. "This isn't just about saving his life anymore," Michael whispered, watching as the bear deliberately wiped away the previous message and began tracing new letters. "There's something he's trying to tell us. Something that's been waiting 40 years to be revealed." The new message appeared slowly. "Transform at dawn." Dr. Chen's clipboard clattered to the floor. "This is impossible," she breathed, backing away slightly. "Bears don't have the cognitive ability to—" "Nothing about this has ever been possible," Michael interrupted, his hand steady on the bear's fur. "And yet here we are." He leaned closer to the massive creature, their eyes meeting in a moment of profound understanding. "What happened that night? What are you trying to tell me?" The bear's response was to trace one more word, its movements growing weaker with each stroke. "Curse." Suddenly, the monitors began screaming. The bear's heart rate plummeted, its massive body shuddering with effort. Dr. Chen sprang into action, barking orders to her team, but Michael remained frozen, his mind racing to piece together an impossible puzzle. "The experimental treatment," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to do it now, but not here." He turned to Dr. Chen, his expression fierce with determination. "We need to take him to the cabin." "The cabin?" Dr. Chen stared at him in disbelief. "Michael, he'll never survive the journey. He needs immediate medical intervention." "Trust me," Michael pleaded, his hand still resting on the bear's head. "Everything that's happened, the rescue, these messages, all of it, it's leading us back there. It's where this all began, and it's where it needs to end." The bear's massive paw found Michael's arm, gripping it with gentle insistence. Their eyes met once more, and in that moment, Michael understood. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about breaking a cycle that had begun 4 decades ago in the depths of a Montana winter. As the medical team prepared for an unprecedented emergency transport, Michael never left the bear's side. He whispered stories of the intervening years, of how that night in the wilderness had shaped his entire life, of the debt he had carried in his heart for 40 years. The bear listened with those impossibly knowing eyes, occasionally squeezing Michael's hand with its paw when certain memories seemed to resonate. As they loaded the massive creature into a specially equipped transport vehicle, the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. "Hold on," Michael murmured, watching as the bear's eyes began to drift closed. "We're almost there. Just hold on a little longer." But even as he spoke the words, he could feel time slipping away like sand through an hourglass. Whatever secret this extraordinary creature carried, whatever truth waited to be revealed, they had precious little time to uncover it. The transport vehicle roared to life, beginning its desperate race against the rising sun. In the back, Michael Thompson sat beside his unlikely guardian, knowing that the next few hours would either unlock a 40-year mystery or end in heartbreak. But one thing was certain: nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The old cabin emerged from the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost from Michael's past. Frost-covered windows reflected the emergency vehicle's headlights as they pulled up to the weathered structure, their beams cutting through swirling snow. Inside the transport unit, the bear's breathing had grown dangerously shallow, each breath a battle against time itself. "Easy now," Michael commanded, as the team carefully moved the massive creature into the cabin. The familiar scent of pine and wood smoke filled the air. Nothing had changed in 40 years, as if the cabin itself had been waiting for this moment. Dr. Chen quickly set up her emergency equipment, her hands steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Whatever you think needs to happen." "Michael, it needs to happen now. We're losing him." Michael knelt beside the bear, their eyes meeting one final time. In the depths of those intelligent eyes, he saw not just recognition, but a profound sadness tinged with hope. The bear's paw reached out, trembling with effort, and traced one last message in the dust on the cabin floor. "Forgive me." As the first ray of dawn light pierced through the cabin's eastern window, something extraordinary began to happen. The bear's form seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Dr. Chen stumbled backward, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. The emergency team watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before them. The bear's massive body began to change, its form shifting and dissolving like morning mist. In its place, materializing as if from a dream, lay an elderly man with silver hair and weather-worn features. His eyes, the same knowing eyes that had watched over Michael that winter night, filled with tears. "John," Michael whispered, recognition hitting him like a physical blow. "John Hudson, my father's old hunting partner." The man nodded weakly. His hand, bearing a scar identical to the bear's paw, reached for Michael's. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant to keep this secret for so long." Through labored breaths, John revealed the truth that had haunted him for 4 decades. He had been cursed by an ancient power in these very woods, transformed into a bear after a tragic accident that had cost the life of another hunter. His punishment was to roam the wilderness in ursine form, only able to take human shape at dawn and dusk, until he could perform an act of pure, selfless love. "That night I found you," John whispered, his voice growing weaker. "I knew it was my chance, but the curse, it wouldn't break unless I remained silent about who I truly was. All these years I've watched over you from afar, making sure you were safe." His eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too, like I lost your father's friendship after the accident." Michael gripped John's hand tighter, his own tears falling freely now. "You've been protecting me all this time, even after the curse could have been broken?" John smiled faintly. "Some bonds go deeper than magic, deeper than curses. I chose to remain as I was, to be your guardian, but now..." He glanced at the rising sun streaming through the window. "Now it's time to let go." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her medical training warring with the impossible scene before her. "The experimental treatment, we can still try..." But John shook his head. "No, my time has come. The curse is broken, not by any magic, but by love. Your love, Michael. Your willingness to risk everything to save me, just as I once did for you. That's the truest magic of all." As the morning light filled the cabin, John's breathing began to slow. Michael held his hand, telling him about all the ways that night had shaped his life, about his work with animals, about the compassion that one bear's sacrifice had taught him. "You didn't just save my life that night," Michael said softly. "You showed me what it means to be truly human." John's last smile was peaceful. Smile was serene. "And you, my boy, you taught me that love knows no boundaries, not time, not form, not even the line between man and beast." His eyes drifted to the window, where the Montana wilderness stretched endlessly beneath the rising sun. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Just like that night." As John Hudson took his final breath, a sudden warmth filled the cabin, and for just a moment, everyone present swore they could hear the distant, mournful call of a grizzly bear echoing through the valleys. Michael stood at the window, tears streaming down his face, watching as a pair of eagles soared past, their wings catching the golden light of dawn. In the years that followed, Michael would often return to the cabin, leaving offerings of honey and berries at its door. The legend of the guardian bear would be told and retold, a story of sacrifice, redemption, and the extraordinary power of unconditional love. And on quiet winter nights, when the moon is full and the snow falls soft and thick, some say you can still see a massive grizzly bear watching over the forest, protecting all those who lose their way in the wilderness of life.